So first, looking at NGL production in the U.S., we see that it rose rapidly from 2010 through 2015. And compared to that production growth, we'll see moderate growth through 2020. As you can see, a bulk of the production is coming from plays closest to the U.S. Gulf Coast, such as the Eagle Ford, Permian, and Anadarko basins. And going forward, most of this growth will come from the Permian. This is given current drilling productivity due to its favorable economics right now.
Just to talk a little bit about Antero, basically in the position where we're the largest single supplier of NGLs in the United States. 34% of our product value is actually in the NGL bandwidth. We're down to about 20% annual growth rate, but it's still working well for us. The two plants that we have basically sponsored up in the Marcellus and Utica, the Sherwood plant, which is in the Marcellus region in West Virginia, and then the Seneca plant, which is over in the Ohio area for the Utica gas. Sherwood continues to grow and currently is basically the largest plant in North America, other than a plant I used to work with up on the North Slope, which was the basically the butane recovery facility or the gas conditioning facility on the North Slope.
Permian's going to have capacity. You know, I'm of the opinion midstream pipeline companies continually overbuild. I don't think they're going to be constrained.
This gives you a little summary of what's going on in the U.S. growth as far as propanes, butanes. As you can see, Permian is still the big daddy, but as far as Appalachia, as far as percentage growth, has been a substantial grower of new supply up there, and as a result, much new infrastructure is required to develop and market and get that out of the basin and get it to the right end destination. On the C3 and C4, I'd say we're in a way in an advantage over the Permian from the standpoint that when you look at the cost of just getting it from the Houston plant, which is by Pittsburgh, over to the water, on the Delaware River at Marcus Hook, we actually, the combined of both the terminal fee and the transport to load out is substantially cheaper than taking the transport from the Permian down to the Gulf and paying the fairly costly terminal fees that you have to pay to get up onto a ship. So I think C3, C4 were advantaged. C2 is a more complicated beast. You don't have the access to all the Gulf Coast crackers, and at least for the time being, the amount of ethane that's going to float out of the Appalachian area down to the Gulf Coast is kind of limited at the 145,000 barrels that ATEX can provide to get down there. But we have a number of other options, with the local crackers. So it's kind of an entirely different marketplace. It's kind of impacted on how we structure our contracts. For example, for ethane up in the Northeast, we do what we call a gas plus contract up there, because really the alternative is keeping the ethane in the gas stream. So if we can get some bit of chemical premium above the gas value, we're happy to sell the ethane, which is obviously courted a lot of interest in develop additional crackers up in the Northeast. Plus with ME2X coming online, there still is a continued development of market around the world that's going to be connected to ship traffic. The Permian is clearly the best place for ethane to the Gulf Coast. As a result, the ATEX project got developed. I personally developed that with the Enterprise folks back in 2012 to get it kicked off. Along with Chesapeake, they helped us baseload some good volumes into that project. But given the costliness of getting ethane down to the Gulf Coast, at this point we focus more again on having a regional cracker up there. We're the largest supplier, to the Shell cracker up at Monica over in Beaver County, right outside of Pittsburgh. And needless to say, the PTT folks are trying to develop a cracker up there too. And most recently, I hope it's out today. It should be out today or tomorrow. But I think our continued push up to help the Canadians out up in Sarnia is going to be pretty evident with their latest expansion of the Corunna cracker up in the Sarnia area. So we're excited to see the diversity of the different areas that we can take our products and continue our ability to keep the ethane machine moving up there.
Looking at ethane demand, we see that it has risen significantly since 2016. This is due to a number of crackers that have come online. We had 4 come online in 2017, and we're going to have an additional 4 to 5 come online in 2018. As you can see, there's a second wave of crackers that will come online starting 2021, led by Shell's in Pennsylvania. And this second wave of crackers will be primarily located along the U.S. East Coast in the ethane-rich Marcellus, giving it some advantages.
Kind of the disadvantage of the Northeast is you don't have the salt dome storage that you have down in the Gulf Coast and Mont Belvieu. So it takes a lot of creativity and refrigerated storage tanks to make sure the logistics work out as far as the ethane front up there.
I guess, where do you stand on the ethane crackers? Like, do you think they will see, come into fruition? And if they do, I guess, how would that demand in the Northeast impact supplies into the U.S. Gulf Coast?
We have a huge amount of confidence in Shell's ability to execute. They announced that it was going FID almost, I think, a year ago. So it's been quite a while since that. And, they're continuing to do the development work. There's even some talks that they may be ahead of schedule on getting that cracker in. Very helpful for that area, with the existing other facilities up there, like the Sarnia facility, both Imperial and Novachem have crackers up in Sarnia that have been converted from LPG to ethane. And so it is a separate universe. If at some point in time there's additional interconnectivity that could happen to the Gulf Coast, like through the Centennial Project. We were assessing the Centennial Project that Enterprise pitched about a year ago. The wave of new ethane coming out of the Permian has certainly fueled a lot of the Gulf Coast crackers that come on. So I think you'll continue to see kind of two different universes. In ethane, you'll have the Northeast universe, and then you'll have the universe that's fed from the Permian, Mid-Continent, and Rockies areas. And of course, kind of another unique beast is the Bakken. Obviously, I think right now, when you look at the Vantage pipeline that goes up to Joffrey up in Alberta, for Novachem's facility, I think they would argue that they probably wish they had doubled the size of that pipeline. Yeah. Again, it was built speculatively initially, but it's turned out to generate quite a bit of ethane up for the Canadian petrochemical business. So it's, in a way, it's almost three different pools of ethane in North America. You'll have the Canadian pool in the Western Canada, the kind of the Gulf Coast down to Belvieu, and along the Gulf Coast down even to Corpus, because Mont Belview's crowded. So a lot of this expansion has to continue down the coast toward Corpus Christi.
Looking at the ethane supply-demand balance, we expect it to be flipped by the end of this year in 2018, just because it's highly unlikely that given projected ethane supply that would be able to meet demand. This will cause ethane prices to increase, as well as ethane recovery, even from the basins furthest from the Gulf Coast where ethane rejection is highest, such as the Bakken. So by 2020, we'll likely see ethane rejection rates decrease. Are operators asking UOP for more flexible plants when it comes to ethane rejection or ethane recovery?
This company came to us. They have about 20 GSP or gas subcooled plants. They were running in rejection to semi-rejection. And what they've come and asked us for is said, look, we see future ethane going up. So we're going to start to go in recovery. We want to be prepared. We have all these plants, and they've been fantastic for us. They were all provided by UOP or Thomas Russell at the time. And they get great propane when I don't have to recover my ethane. What do I do when we make that switch? How can we actually retrofit it to make it up for the times and fit for purpose? So the Honeywell or high recovery retrofit, it gets the C2 and C3 at 99.9% in going back into the recovery mode of operation. We'll have this one go in first quarter of 2018 into service. We've seen high demand for it already. Seen quite a bit of demand for it in anywhere from the Permian all the way to the Northeast. Fractionation companies come to us saying, well, look, we got all these guys, these midstream gas processing plant guys, and they're thinking about going into recovery mode. How can we make sure that we can take all that ethane? We have these existing assets. What can we do to retrofit those assets? And then as well as we have new ones coming on, what can we do to keep the plot space down? Well, that was where these UOP, MD, and ECMD trays came in. Companies come in and saying, great, let's retrofit our deethanizers to make sure we can handle that capacity.
Due to this spike in ethane crackers, is the possibility of having a surplus in ethylene supply, leading some to ponder the possibility of having ethylene export terminals along the U.S. Gulf Coast. You have Odgeville, which plans to have an FID date coming up pretty soon in early 2018, as well as Enterprise, who has yet to announce their FID or the exact location of those plants, but we know that they both would be along the U.S. Gulf Coast. But there are some risks associated with the possibilities of ethylene export terminals. One being there isn't a true assurance of the possibilities of supply, of feedstock supply, as well as polyethylene offers better margins.
There was a number of export projects that came out about in the last 8 years, and we've seen kind of basically a kind of a focus on trying to figure out which are the right projects, both in the Gulf Coast and the Northeast. And clearly the one that's emerged in the Northeast is the Mariner East project with Sunoco. So that's been our primary focus. What we've looked at over the past 5-6 years is different ways to get the products down to the Gulf Coast. The only problem is, pipe capacity is expensive going down there, and to get it down there on rail, you're looking at about 25 cents a gallon. So we've really focused on getting the product where it needs to be, which is the liquid point. And I know a lot of people in Houston think of liquid point as being Mont Belvieu, but we ultimately believe that the world marketplace on the high seas is really where your ultimate equalizer is on market power. And so where our focus is all to get to blue water. For Appalachia, here's what we look at for our C3+ takeaway. The traditional TEPCO system owned by Enterprise, which allows basically propane to go back and forth between the Gulf Coast, has been the primary focus for years. But again, Mariner East is one of the key things that we view as going to really make things happen. Greatly in favor of the Marcus Hook. We think that that's really the ideal place to export from in the East Coast. It's basically an advantaged transportation point to pretty much anywhere in the world, except going through the Panama Canal over to Asia, to Japan and so on. But again, the disadvantage is only a day going that way. So we view that Mariner East, going out of the Delaware River is unquestionably the best place. We see there's lower fog delays and a number of other reasons why even in the river it's a better spot. You don't have nearly the ship congestion that you have down in the Houston Ship Channel either.
Propane exports from the U.S., we can see that it has risen significantly since 2010. Most of these exports are headed to Asia. We can see that it doubled since 2015, and this trend will likely continue at least through 2020.
China, India, a lot of growth there. Korea, not as much, but still substantial growth. Europe, again, has been not as exciting given the maturity of a lot of the infrastructure there. But, as far as Indonesia, we've seen good percentage growth down there, but again, not as much as the magnitude as the other parts of Asia.
Propane has been displacing Middle Eastern supplies. There's likely an oversupply in the propane market given the rapid rise of propane exports from the U.S.